Formula One teams are not expected to support a push to implement blanket-free slick tyres in 2024, when a decision is made at the end of next month. Even while team officials have avoided openly rejecting the new tyres, they have shown very little enthusiasm for the change, and the majority are widely believed to not want it to happen. The new tyres are unpopular among drivers, with Grand Prix Drivers Association Director George Russell, who tested the most recent generation, stating firmly that he feels they would be dangerous. Pirelli are not happy with these comments and have even hit back at the drivers, saying they should just drive better. More on this later. Let's dive into the tyre plans for now. Blankets were scheduled to be phased out in 2024, but the regulations were altered to allow them to be reinstated, provided Pirelli could demonstrate by the end of July that it had produced a tyre capable of doing the job. The company has already created blanket-free wets, which were used for the first time in Monaco, but its effort to bring their innovative Inters to Singapore was met with opposition from the teams. Meanwhile, slick tyre research has been underway, with the most recent test done earlier this month in Barcelona by Mercedes and Ferrari. The final test before the decision will be held at Silverstone following the British Grand Prix, and will include Red Bull, Williams and Haas. If the FIA considers Pirelli has made a compelling argument, the issue will be decided by a vote by the teams. "I think we'll reserve judgment until we've done a test," said Red Bull's Christian Horner when asked about the tyre decision. "Daniel Ricciardo is going to drive the car at the test, and we will get the feedback from that running, and then I'm sure Pirelli will make the right decision. I don't think it's what the drivers want, but my fear with these things is that when you think you're going to achieve something simplistically that would create better racing, that there will then be a whole lot of effort go into trying to heat tyres very quickly, on outlaps and so on, that could drive a lot more cost in. Everybody has tyre blankets, they do the job. I think what we should be looking at is sustainable ways of powering those tyre blankets, as opposed to removing them." Mercedes Technical Director James Allison, whose team performed the most recent 2024 tyre test, stated that the tyres are not yet ready. "I'd say that the early look at running without blankets, it's not exactly a done deal to think that there's going to be a good thing next year," he said. "I'd say there's plenty of challenge to make that work." Williams team principal James Vowles also stated that the new tyres had not to be completely tested, but that the Silverstone test would provide his team with additional data. "My view is a very pragmatic one," he said. "Show us a tyre where you take the blankets off and it performs whether it's Spa and 5 degrees, or whether we're in Bahrain and 40 degrees, and happily I'll sign up to it, because I think it's a good step. At the moment we haven't fully seen a tyre that's capable of doing it. The test will help and give us another bullet point to it. Reading between the lines, I don't think we're quite there yet, but the direction of travel is good." Alpine's Otmar Safnauer stated that blankets constitute an essence of F1. "We had a plan. Run the tyres, understand them, and how good they are," said the American. "Once that happens, I'm confident we'll make a good decision." It's really hard to know, really hard to be able to answer. I think we have a pretty decent show now. And yeah, there's all sorts of considerations with the tyres. There's other series that don't have tyre blankets, but there does come a time where the essence of Formula One, whatever that is, where maybe tyre blankets is part of it that we should keep. Aston Martin CEO Mike Crack stated that he believed the FIA to make the correct decision on whether to allow a team vote. "To be honest, I cannot comment because we've only tested them in Jerez, but that was an earlier generation," he said. "We follow on only as a passenger basically what is happening now. I think the FIA will make the right decision, honestly. We have a wet that is without blankets. I think we have an intermediate that is almost ready to run without. And then we see what happens to the slicks. But I think we need to trust the FIA that they take the right decision for next year. It's up to the FIA proposing a vote or not. So the FIA takes the first step. What we need to do is try to have as much info as we can have for the moment that there is voting, and then take a decision. If the blanket-free tyres are rejected for 2024, Pirelli will likely put development on hold in the coming months until it knows the outcome of the tyre competition and whether it will still be in F1 for a second attempt to introduce them in 2025. If it loses a contract to a competitor, the program will undoubtedly be cancelled. But the slicks are not the only tyres up for a blanket-free future, as the intermediates without blankets are already finished, but are yet to be used. But this development has hit a roadblock for now. Pirelli CEO Mario Izzola confesses he has no idea why Formula One teams declined the possibility to use blanket-free intermediate tyres in the 2023 season. the decision must be supported by at least 8 teams. Despite positive testing results, a majority of voters decided not to implement the alteration during the Monaco Grand Prix weekend. Usually we have some races with rain, like Suzuka for example, Isola said, and it was a good opportunity to test them before the end of the season. The problem is that to test them as an additional prototype is difficult, because we should send them everywhere in the world. I was talking to the FIA, offering the intermediate for Singapore, and then they came back to me saying no. The teams didn't agree. Unfortunately, we had more than 2 teams against, because we needed 8 teams in favour. Isola said that he had no idea why teams would reject the new intermediates after accepting the complete wets. That's a good question, but I don't have an answer honestly. Only a few teams participated in the intermediate testing, and Isola conceded that others may have wished to put the new tyres through their paces before committing to using them on race weekends. However, he acknowledged that allowing everyone to test them is impractical. Clearly, it's also difficult to try intermediate or wets, he said. It never happened before that we had a full test with all the teams, because you simply cannot organise it. The rejection came despite the favourable results of Pirelli's dedicated intermediate testing, with Alpine doing the most recent run at Paul Ricard earlier this month before the voting. Esteban Ocon was quite happy with the new intermediate step. The step is good step, said Isola. Without blankets, they were working well, warm-up was good. And we tested also in other sessions with different conditions and so on. So in all of these sessions, they have judged positive, and sometimes it is what it is. Alan Permain, Alpine Sports Director, verified that the new tyres performed well in the Ricard test. We were testing intermediates without blankets and they were really good, said Permain. Pirelli have done an outstanding job, and we were comparing them to the standard intermediate that was running with a blanket. But just having one team on board is not good enough. We'll have to see later in the season if they get the change to test them again, and maybe introduce them into race situations. But for now, it looks like they'll be pushed to 2024. Just like the normal blanket ban, which has gotten a lot of criticism from drivers. So Pirelli has responded to George Russell's and other drivers' concerned accusations that Formula 1 is not prepared for a tyre blanket ban in 2024, and they weren't holding back. After participating in the post-Barcelona test, the Mercedes driver expressed worry that putting the tyres into a racing scenario was too soon. Even though it was an excellent circuit for measuring how well the tyres performed in a high-speed, high-stress environment, Russell felt the circumstances were not typical of what drivers would face all year. However, Pirelli engineer Simone Berra stated that the company had no issues with their data and urged that drivers modify their driving behaviours. In terms of safety, I don't see from the data that I've seen any specific risk. You need to change the way you are driving in the first lap for sure, he said about the tyres. Drivers will have to adapt their driving style, even to protect the tyre, because you can generate graining even if you push too much in the first corners and the tyre is not up to temperature. I respect the driver's opinion, that's for sure, but I think that obviously there will be differences compared to the old products and all the tyre management. The FIA, F1 and the teams will make a final decision on whether to proceed with the ban following a second test at Silverstone following the British Grand Prix, when they have been provided with Pirelli's findings. Russell stated that he would be very concerned about his technicians in the pit lane during a pit stop, and that there would be crashes, I have no doubt, if the blanket ban is implemented. He's not the only driver who's expressed worry, with Lewis Hamilton calling the swap dangerous if it goes ahead. Pirelli is certain that its structure can be utilised in a racing setting, since it was engineered to reach temperature faster than the existing specification. We consider the tyres raceable, otherwise they would not be submitted for evaluation, explained Berra. Obviously in cold conditions it could be trickier to bring the tyres up to temperature, but I think it's just a matter of doing the first portion of the lap. According to Berra, the data from the testing indicates that it is feasible to warm the tyres up in the initial first sector, with the tyre reaching the same temperatures it would typically achieve if it came out of the blankets. He added, in the first sectors, we can see much more difference compared to the other sectors, because already Sector 2 and Sector 3 are in line with the lap times with blankets usage. It's just a matter of really managing the first few corners and being careful. So Pirelli is just pushing the problem onto the drivers. Fix your driving style or drive slower in your outlap to avoid crashes, and just deal with it seems to be Pirelli's attitude. Wouldn't this just create chaos on track? Imagine 18 or 19 cars driving full speed, and 1 or 2 cars rejoining the grid at around 60 to 80% of full pace, just because they were the first to pit. This would result in crashes in one of the first corners after switching tyres, right? What do you think? Is this a good development? And are you excited to see the drivers being challenged in another way on the grid? We're unsure if this is a good development or a plainly stupid one. We like close racing, but in a safe way. Let us know your thoughts about the upcoming changes in the comments down below.